Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to talk about something that has been it's been being harped on in the news quite a bit lately, and it's about the new Joker film, which is set to premiere next month. Um, Now, for anybody who's been living under a rock, obviously this is Joaquin Phoenix who is playing the Joker, and this is supposed to be kind of a solo outing. This is not in relation really to Batman. This is a Joker story. This is a Joker film. Um, and I'm pretty sure Batman does not even show up in this movie. This is more of just kind of a study of the Joker, which I personally find very interesting because he's kind of an interesting character, even though this is a departure from the comics to what appears to be quite a drastic degree in certain cases. But the real news is that a lot of people have been going after this movie because of its what is described as a realistic depiction of violence. And it goes into the larger argument of does media cause real life? Does certain types of entertainment and media cause real life violence? And this is something that it's been argued. Pretty much through every medium. It's been argued for films, for comic books, for video games, and to look at what's been happening over the last few months is, we've seen stuff recently like Joaquin Phoenix actually walked out of an interview when a reporter asked him if he thinks that his movie could have real life implications in terms of causing violent acts. We have people saying that very recently they've been dredging up the Aurora shootings that happened back in 2012 when The Dark Knight Rises came out, and a man went into a theater dressed as the Joker and proceeded to kill a bunch of people in that movie theater because they didn't know exactly what was going on. They thought it was like a publicity stunt or something, and it it's very it's very strange when you kind of look at the reasoning behind it, and I understand the reasoning behind it, even though I believe it is wrong. And again, this speaks to the bigger issue, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about here. Because going into the nuances of Joaquin Phoenix and the Joker movie, I haven't personally seen it yet. I've seen a few little leaks here and there, but you know this is just going into the larger argument, and I feel like that'll cover any issues that we have with that have been coming up recently with Joker. And the idea, again, like I've said before, the idea of media causing real world violence has existed for a very long time. I think Natural Born Killers at one point, a movie starring Woody Harrelson, was blamed in some aspect for the Columbine shootings, as were violent video games. Recently, in the two mass shootings that happened a few months ago, there was blame put about for violent video games. Again, there's been claims made by that for comic books. There's been claims made by that for pretty much every type of media, books, music, everything else. Even back in the 60s, Helter Skelter was, they tried to make it out that was the reasoning, that was part of the reason why Charles Manson killed all those people in the Hollywood Hills. And for me, it's never been about the media. It's always about the individual, and I think that's how we should treat this. I don't think you shouldn't blame media for something that you perceive it has done that is not its intent. If you, it's media, not media, but entertainment is different than propaganda. Propaganda is something that kind of it brainwashes you. It makes you want to do something that maybe you don't want to do, and we've seen that again through history with other things. It doesn't. Entertainment is meant to, again, it's meant to entertain. I don't think there's a movie out there that's literally pointing at the screen and telling you, I want you to go out and start killing people, because that is not only is it insane, I don't think any studio in their right mind would let that movie go if that was something that was in the film. And that was the message of the film, was to go out and start murdering people. But here we are, and we find ourselves at this crossroads yet again. And I know we will find ourselves at this crossroads multiple times in the future, probably. But in relation to film itself, the thing is that people want an easy answer to these things. They want to point at something and say, "This is the cause. We know this is the cause," and it's very simple. And all if we remove this, then everything's fixed. Or if we nerf this, or if we change this, if we make this less violent, if we curb this, then we make everything all right. And I think that's a very narrow-minded view of this subject, because I don't think that movies cause real-world violence in the drastic, vast majority of cases. I don't think they cause it at all, really, actually. But the thing is it's a commonality. It's something that, oh, hey, look at what these look at. I mentioned it before, Natural Born Killers. Look at this movie. Look, it inspired the Columbine kids. Let's get rid of this movie. Let's get rid of movies like this, because they're going to inspire people to do things like this. And I think what you should be looking at is the mental health of the youth in this country. I think what you should be looking at is the spike in violence, for the most part, has been from younger individuals, people that are in their teens or 20s, stuff like that. It's for the most part, it is not older people that are doing these things. Now there are some, but again, I think you need to look more at the mental health of the individual, because the film might be a catalyst, but the problem was already there to begin with. And it doesn't make sense to get rid of the catalyst and not solve the problem. Because if it wasn't natural born killers that these kids were going to be attracted to, what was it going to be? Because it was going to be something else. And you can't just go about and censor every single thing. And it kind of goes back to the idea of movies being an art form, and that's subjective. But I think that if you put a hard curb on film, then ultimately you're making it harder for film to grow as a genre, as a medium. And that's not good. You don't want to narrow something down. Again, this is kind of what's happening with comedy now, in a sense, with the sensitivity stuff. It's the same kind of idea. You're limiting something that shouldn't be limited, at least not in the way that it is being limited. And again, this goes back to a mental health argument, but I think that when you look at the Joker, when you look at not just this particular version with Joaquin Phoenix, but the Joker as a character, yeah, I can understand that maybe he might have some real world parallels with people. He's a deranged psychopath. He kills people. He has real no remorse or any kind of emotional attachment to what he's doing. And people look at somebody who's a mass shooter and they see a legitimate comparison of somebody who is deranged, who doesn't care about human life, and who is willing to take it at in mass, even if it means the loss of their own. And it's silly, in a sense, to say that one inspires the other, because it is not the purpose of the Joker to inspire people to actually go out and kill people. And for the media to push this is irresponsible of them. And honestly, it shows the fact that they're not willing to tackle the actual issue, which is more along the lines of mental health. And again, I go back to the same idea that if it wasn't this movie that triggered somebody, it was going to be something else. And if you tackle the mental illness as opposed to tackling the trigger, then the trigger means nothing. If you have a blank in a gun and you fire it, no one dies, or generally nobody dies. So that's kind of the idea, is that you still have that live round in the gun that misfired, but the next time it might fire. And I realize it's kind of an on the nose type of comparison, but it gets the point across. And I think that Joker is as long as Warner Brothers does not bend the knee, and try and cancel the release of this thing or do something else, which I don't think they will do. They've released press releases already for it that says that it is not the goal of this film to cause any kind of real life violence. We are not intending to do that. This is a movie. And again, there's some manipulation where the media is saying, "Oh, you're depicting him as like a hero and stuff like that, as like a sympathetic, or at least a sympathetic villain." It's like, no, the Joker's a psychopath. And again, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know exactly, if you could make that comparison or not. But the Joker's a psychopath, and uh, generally, you don't have a deranged psychopath be a hero, or at least not be somewhat sympathetic. Now, you may be sympathetic to him at the beginning because, I mean, it is a movie. You need to have some kind of a connection to the main character. You can't just be, you can't just be there and watching it. In a lot of cases, especially with a character study, you kind of have to be connected to them at some point. So they have to have some kind of relatability to the audience. But it doesn't really, it doesn't pass through to the point where they're pushing this narrative. And again, I think the only reason they really bring up the Aurora thing is because the guy dressed up as the Joker and did something. Because in reality, I think that had very little to do with the Joker himself, and more to do with the fact that this guy dressed up as a movie character and went into a theater because he knew that people would kind of like, oh, it might be a publicity stunt. He was basically trying to fool people into not believing that he was going to start killing people, and then he just started killing people. So it was essentially a way to make it so that people wouldn't just run away as soon as he started murdering other people. And again, it's just something that this argument is going to be had time and time and time again because people want people want a scapegoat. People essentially want a scapegoat for something because they don't want to tackle the real issue because it's very complicated. It is. It's not something that I think you can solve overnight. It's not something that can be solved. You can't just stick a Band-Aid on it and say, oh, it's good. And it's going to take a lot of different things, a lot of different changes on a social level in order to change the way that these people act and the way that these people are treated in society. Because a lot of these people need serious mental help, and they either don't get it, or they're ignored, or they aren't reported for whatever reason until it gets to the point where we have a national tragedy. And unfortunately, this has now been related back to movies. And the only thing that I hope is that this does not have a drastic negative effect on Joker or any other movie that happens to co-align. And before this gets mentioned in the comments, I know I was very critical of The Hunt. And I still am. I think it's a not necessarily a great premise for a film, especially to base it a lot on politics, very bluntly on politics. But my criticism of that was more with the advertising and the timing of the film. I didn't necessarily say the film shouldn't be released. I said the film should not be released should not be released on the schedule that it was at. Maybe shelve it for a couple of years and release it later. So that's just a clarification on that, so I don't seem like a hypocrite. But those are my thoughts on this. I'd like to know yours. Do you think that movies actually cause real life violence? Do you plan on seeing Joker? Does this change your mind a little bit? Seeing the stuff that's going on, or are you just as excited for it as you were, and you want to go see it in theaters? Put your thoughts in the comments. Again, I'd like to know what you're thinking. Hit the bell for notifications. Hit the like button. Subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?